What if everything you were taught from birth was obsolete? Your grandfather, Genghis Khan, bequeathed you a world washed in blood and engulfed in flame. He taught you that strength is found in the saddle, your homeland is the steppe, and wealth is something you take. But you stand at the border of two worlds and realize his laws no longer work. Before you lies China, an ancient, incomprehensible civilization that can be conquered by force but cannot be held without betraying everything your people believe in. Kublai, grandson of the conqueror of the universe, faced this very choice. He had to decide who to be, the last great Khan of the Mongols or the first emperor of a new, unprecedented dynasty. This choice would cost him his family, his friendships, and perhaps his very soul. This is the story of a man who broke every rule and won. We will follow him through 5 steps that changed his life and the map of the world forever. First, we'll see him go against his own brother in a war fought not for gold, but for the very idea of the future. Then we'll witness the great temptation, how the wisdom and luxury of China began to transform a barbarian into a monarch. We'll see him risk it all, proclaiming himself the Son of Heaven and founding the Yuan Dynasty. We'll live through his greatest triumph, the fall of the last bastion of old China. And finally, we'll witness nature itself challenge him, sending a divine wind to reveal the limits of power for even the mightiest man on earth. Get ready. This story will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about conquerors. The year is 1259. The Mongol Empire, the largest in history, stretches from the Pacific Ocean to the Danube. But beneath its unity, a deep fracture is hidden. After the sudden death of the Great Khan, Möngke, during a campaign in China, the empire holds its breath. Who will inherit the throne of Genghis Khan? His 2 grandsons, 2 brothers, Kublai and Ariq Böke, represent 2 completely different paths. Ariq Böke, the younger brother, is in the heart of the empire, in the sacred capital of Karakorum. He's supported by the old guard, the Mongol Traditionalists, who see the future in loyalty to the ancestral code, eternal war, nomadic life, and contempt for settled cultures. They are the empire's past. Kublai, meanwhile, is in the south, in China, where he has spent years not just fighting, but more importantly, learning to govern. He saw not just a territory to plunder, but a source of unimaginable wealth, technology, and human resources that can be managed, not just exterminated. Hearing of his brother's death, he convenes his own kurultais, a council of his nobles, right on Chinese soil, and proclaims himself Great Khan. In response, Ariq Böke, with the support of the high-born nobility, does the same in Karakorum. The empire is shattered. 2 Khans, 2 centers of power. A devastating 4-year civil war begins between the brothers. This wasn't just a battle for power, it was a battle for the soul of the Mongol world. So let's break down why Kublai did this. Was it an act of betrayal or brilliant foresight? Unlike Ariq Böke, Kublai understood a simple yet terrifying truth for a nomad. An empire built on plunder cannot be sustained. It consumes itself. Governing millions of Chinese required not Mongol fury, but Chinese bureaucracy, stable taxes, and permanent capitals. He bet on a future where the Mongols would become not just conquerors, but a ruling elite in symbiosis with the conquered peoples. He deliberately chose the path of Sinicization, understanding it was the only way to control the wealthiest part of his domain. For him, the war with his brother wasn't treason. It was the only way to save his grandfather's legacy from inevitable collapse. The victory over Ariq Böke in 1264 was a bitter one. Kublai secured the title of Great Khan, but he paid for it with the unity of the empire. The Golden Horde, the Chagatai Khanate, the western parts of the domain effectively broke away, refusing to recognize his authority. The Mongol aristocracy in his native Karakorum viewed him with suspicion, seeing him as an apostate who had betrayed the traditions of the steppe for Chinese riches. Kublai found himself in a paradoxical situation. He was the ruler of the Mongols, but his real power base, his army and his resources were now in China. He could no longer rule like his grandfather. He had to either break China or accept its rules. And Kublai makes his choice. He begins the most massive cultural and political experiment of the 13th century. He permanently moves the capital from the steppe land of Karakorum to a new, magnificent city he builds on the site of modern-day Beijing, Khanbalik, the city of the Khan. He surrounds himself not with Mongol nobles, but with Confucian scholars and Chinese officials who help him create a new system of administration based on Chinese dynastic models. He introduces paper money, creates a tax system, and promotes science and the arts. To the old Mongol guard, every such step was a slap in the face. Their Khan, their leader, was sinking deeper into an alien culture, adopting its rituals, language, and even its way of thinking. Why did he do it? This wasn't blind admiration for Chinese culture. It was a cold, pragmatic calculation. Kublai understood that you couldn't rule 100 million Chinese with the steppe laws of the Yasa. To extract the resources from this vast territory for future wars, you needed an effective administration which only the local cadres could provide. By adopting Chinese customs, he legitimized his rule in the eyes of the conquered people. He was showing he wasn't just another barbarian invader, but the new Son of Heaven who had received the right to rule the Middle Kingdom. This masquerade was necessary to hold power. He sacrificed his Mongol identity to build something greater, an empire that united the steppe and the farmland. By 1271, Kublai had been ruling from Khanbalik for 7 years. He had consolidated his power, crushed the opposition, and established control over northern China. But in the eyes of his millions of subjects, and more importantly, in the eyes of the still unconquered Southern Song Empire, he remained an outsider, a barbarian who had seized the throne by force. His title of Great Khan meant nothing to Confucian scholars and the Chinese aristocracy. To truly rule all under heaven, he needed to speak its language, not just literally, but symbolically. He needed the mandate of heaven, the sacred right to rule that was granted only to legitimate dynasties. And so Kublai makes the most audacious and symbolic move of his life. In 1271, he officially proclaims a new dynasty along the Chinese model. He gives it the name Yuan, the Great Origin. This was a break from all history. He was no longer just a Khan from the line of Genghis, ruling a conquered territory. He was becoming the founder of a legitimate Chinese dynasty, the first emperor of the Yuan. This act was like a thunderclap. For Mongol traditionalists, it was the final betrayal. For the Chinese, it was a shocking claim by a barbarian to their sacred heritage. Kublai put everything on the line, declaring himself not just a conqueror, but the legitimate ruler of all China. What was this? A betrayal of his heritage, or a brilliant political move? Undeniably, the latter. By proclaiming a dynasty, Kublai solved three problems at once. First, he legitimized himself in the eyes of the Chinese populace and elites. Now, he wasn't just an occupier, but an emperor, operating within their own cultural paradigm. Second, it was a powerful ideological blow against the Southern Song Empire. By declaring his own dynasty, Kublai announced that the mandate of heaven had passed to him, and the Song rule was illegitimate. This was the prelude to the final conquest. And third, it was his definitive answer to the Mongol opposition. He was no longer playing by their rules. His empire, from now on, was not a Mongol ulus, but a new, independent Chinese state. Proclaiming the Yuan dynasty was not the end, but the beginning of the final chapter in a long war. To the south, the Southern Song Empire still existed, a vast, wealthy, and populous state, the heir to 1,000 years of Chinese culture. For the Mongols, this was the last and most difficult opponent. For decades, they had been unable to break its resistance. The cities of southern China, protected by rivers, canals, and high walls, were impregnable to steppe cavalry. The Song Empire possessed a powerful navy, advanced technology, including gunpowder weapons, and enormous human resources. It was the last bastion of Chinese independence, and its rulers were determined to fight to the end. Kublai, now Emperor Shizu of the Yuan dynasty, changes tactics. He understands this bastion cannot be taken by brute force. Instead of traditional Mongol raids, he organizes a systematic, multi-year campaign using Chinese methods of war. He builds a massive river fleet to counter the Song navy, hires engineers to create new siege engines, and wages a war of attrition, methodically capturing fortress after fortress. The climax comes at the Battle of Yamen in 1279. It was one of the largest naval battles in world history. After the crushing defeat of the Song fleet, the last loyal official, unwilling to surrender to the barbarians, takes the young child emperor in his arms and leaps with him into the sea. With that act of despair, the Song dynasty ceased to exist. What was the reason for this triumph? Kublai won not because he was a Mongol, but because he learned to think like a Chinese emperor. He used not only force, but strategy, diplomacy, and psychology. He adopted and improved Chinese military technology, creating an army and navy capable of operating on any terrain. But most importantly, by proclaiming himself emperor, he offered the Chinese elites and officials an alternative. He showed that he was willing to preserve their culture and system of government if they swore allegiance to him. Many did just that, defecting to his side, which demoralized and weakened the Song resistance from within. This was a victory not just of arms, but of a new imperial idea. For the first time in history, all of China, from the Great Wall to the South China Sea, was under the rule of one sovereign, and that sovereign was a foreigner. By 1279, Kublai stands at the pinnacle of the world. He is the emperor of all China, the master of the most populous and wealthy country on the planet. His power seems absolute, his resources limitless. But for a man with the blood of Genghis Khan in his veins, there is no rest. His gaze turns east, across the sea, to the mysterious islands the Chinese call Japan, a land that had never known foreign rule. Wealthy and proud, it challenged his omnipotence by its very existence. The conquest of Japan was meant to be the final chord in the symphony of his conquests, proof that there were no limits to his power, on land or at sea. Twice, Kublai assembled an armada the world had never seen. In 1274, the first expedition, weakened by internal strife and unfamiliar with the sea, was forced to retreat due to a powerful storm. But Kublai did not accept this refusal. By 1281, he had gathered a grand fleet, by some estimates over 4,000 ships and 100,000 warriors, to crush the Japanese resistance once and for all. The Mongol Chinese armada landed. The samurai fought desperately, but the forces were unequal. And just as it seemed Japan's fate was sealed, a force beyond the emperor's control intervened. A typhoon of monstrous force, which the Japanese would later call kamikaze, or divine wind, descended on the fleet. In one night, the greatest armada in history was annihilated. What was this? Divine intervention or a tragic accident? For Kublai, it was the most devastating defeat of his life. It hit not just his army, but his reputation. The myth of Mongol invincibility and the boundless power of the Yuan emperor was shattered. The heavens, which he believed had given him the mandate to rule, seemed to have turned away from him. This defeat showed him and the entire world a harsh truth. He had learned to command a civilization, mastered its technologies and strategies, but he could not control the elements. He could conquer a continent, but the ocean would not submit. This divine wind drew the boundaries of his empire and his personal power, serving as a bitter reminder that even for the grandson of Genghis Khan, there are limits. So who was Kublai Khan? The journey we've taken shows there is no simple answer. His story is the trajectory of a great compromise. Starting with a fratricidal war, he defended not just his throne, but his vision of a future where an empire governs rather than just plunders. Then, step by step, he immersed himself in Chinese culture, building a new capital and adopting foreign laws to maintain his power. Proclaiming the Yuan dynasty was his point of no return, and the conquest of the Southern Song was the peak of his triumph, achieving what his grandfather never could. But the failure off the coast of Japan was a bitter lesson, showing that even his will had its limits. Each of these decisions moved him further from his Mongol roots, but brought him closer to creating one of the greatest empires in history. Kublai Khan remains forever a figure at the crossroads of two worlds, transforming from a Khan into an emperor. But while he was building his sedentary empire in the east, on the other side of the world, his cousin Batu Khan was forging a completely different legacy, a legacy of pure conquest and fear. In our next episode, we'll journey to another part of the fractured domain, to the west, to follow a man who remained true to his grandfather's code, a man who, with fire and sword, tore through the Russian principalities and brought the knightly armies of Europe to their knees, striking terror into the hearts of kings. It was a different empire, a different war, and different rules. To catch that journey into the heart of the Mongol invasion of the West, subscribe to the channel.